Students for Western Civilization presents We Europeans, a podcast on European Canadian identity in the 21st century. So we hope that first episode wasn't too dry and academic for you. Which is why that next episode that we're going to give you is a lot more dynamic and entertaining and easier to digest. So what this is an audio recording of a live audio recording of a time that I got pulled out of class for thinking a bit too critically about the topic of the course, which was race and racism. This is between myself and two faculty members. So just for a bit of context, I went to York University. I graduated with a degree in psychology and political science. After university, I went to a college to study digital media because I wanted to use those skills for the purpose of activism, and you can see how that manifests in all the stuff that SWC has produced. So while I was at this college, even though I was studying digital media, I also enrolled in a sociology course because I wanted to see if the stuff that gets taught in a college is as extreme as the stuff that gets taught in universities. I also wanted to see if, because this was a few years after I graduated from university, I wanted to see if things had changed at all. And so this course I took, a sociology course on race and racism, it was structured the way every course is structured, which means it has a component that involves class participation. So every class, the teacher would propose questions to the class to start a class discussion. But like so many of these courses, the topics are so politically charged that when the teacher would ask a question, and you see this I saw this in almost every class, even throughout university, the topics are so charged that it makes everyone so uncomfortable, even the non-white students, that no one wants to say anything. So it would often happen that the teacher would propose a question to the class, and then everyone would just sit in silence, with the teacher looking back and forth, trying to make eye contact with someone who wants to talk. So I'd be sitting at the back of the class and I'd wait patiently for someone to speak. But after maybe 20 seconds of no one saying anything, I'd raise my hand and I'd give my analysis of whatever the teacher had suggested. But of course, I wouldn't be a good little down on my knees white person and say, oh, we are an especially evil people and we should destroy ourselves and I apologize for my existence. Instead, I'd give a nationalist analysis of the Marxist arguments that were being presented to us, and I just rip the limbs off them like we do. But of course, I'd still do it in a calm, respectful way. So one day at the beginning of the class, this was after a few classes, one day I'm sitting in the class, and then someone walks in through the door who I'd never seen before, and he comes up to me and says, "Hi, are you George?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Can you come with me?" So we're walking through the hallways of the school. I didn't know where we were going. And I say to him, "So, this is about thought crime, isn't it?" And he says, "Oh, well, George." And I interrupt him and I say, "Yes, it is." So we get back to the office of the dean of the college. And the guy who had escorted me was the head of the liberal arts department. And so they tell me what you're about to listen to. Before we started, I asked them, do you mind if just before we start, I put my recorder on my phone? And they told me, yeah, go ahead. It's as if they're trying to pin something on me, but they haven't quite decided what it is. They start by saying, you're disrupting the class. And I'm like, well, what evidence is there that I'm disrupting the class? And they say, oh, well, you're not properly citing your sources. And then I cite my sources for them. And they say, oh, well, you're talking about controversial things. And I'm like, well, the course is about race and racism. It's about the most taboo, controversial thing that there could be. And they say, oh, well, you're disrupting the class. And it just keeps going around in these circles and circles. So there are so many bits of context that I wish I could give you, but there's just too much stuff to fit it all in, and I don't want to spend forever talking about context. I want to get to the recording. So there's just a few things that I'm going to say. One is that they accuse me of not properly citing my sources or citing improper sources. What they're referring to is in the course, this is a college course, not a university course. We were assigned one-page journal entries that we were supposed to read after every one of the academic articles that we read. And one of the questions that we were asked in like the first class is, "What is race?" And I said, my response was, well, I like Steve Saylor's definition, who defined race as a slightly inbred extended family. And so I cited him for that. I could have just not cited him and pretended it was my own words, and no one would have blinked. So when he's saying that I cite improper sources, he's actually just referring to that one instance where I quote Steve Saylor. Also, don't listen to this as if it's a debate between commentators on a cable news talk show, because that's not what it is. This is a student versus two faculty members, so there's an obvious power imbalance there. And so throughout the discussion, I'm trying to be as insolent as I can get away with in response to the ridiculousness of the whole Inquisition. While at the same time, I'm kind of holding my hand because I know that they could kick me out of the class. So the debate will end around the 35-minute mark. The one of the two professors gets in the last word, and then I get told, "Oh, we're out of time." So it ends around the 35-minute mark, and then the stuff that follows after that is not really having to do with the debate. It's just kind of administrative stuff. But I'm just going to include it for the sake of full disclosure. So here it is.
So I have asked to meet with you, George, because the instructor of the Race Relations course, Clayton Cobb, has expressed some serious concerns about what he perceives as a value schism between what he's attempting to deliver in terms of the course content and some of the feedback that he's receiving from you in particular. So he's spoken with Andrew, who's chair of the Liberal and English Studies department, and Andrew has come to me to ask for some direction. So I am following process, and I have previously met with the instructor, Clayton Cobb. I've reviewed the course material that he has prepared, the outline, the syllabus, the reading material, etc. And today I had wanted to meet with you to hear your perspective in terms of a following process, and then we can perhaps discuss some options. So this might come as a surprise, it might not, but I would just appreciate hearing from your perspective your thoughts about the course and the delivery and the integrity of the content.
So I signed up for the course, expecting for it to be exactly what it is, expecting it to be extremely biased and one-sided, and the readings to reflect only one side of the story, and on race relations, for a curriculum to consist exclusively of leftist perspectives and no rightist perspectives. And that's really what I'm fascinated by. I'm not just taking the course to study race relations in Canada. I'm taking the course because I'm fascinated by the degree of corruption within our school system, and especially within like sociology. In the United States, if you look at voting patterns, voters for the Democratic Party, if you look at Democratic voters versus Republican voters, Democratic voters outnumber Republicans among sociologists by a ratio of like 29 out of 30. And so it's like I think that's fascinating that it's so one-sided, so politically biased, and so that's why I'm taking the courses. I just think it's so fascinating. And when it comes to race relations, I feel like the stuff that's getting taught, not just in Clayton's course. Like Clayton is delivering exactly what I expected him to deliver. The content of what gets taught in modern liberal arts departments, when it comes especially to race relations, I feel is really hostile towards European peoples. I would even categorize it technically as hate speech. These ideas that race is a social construct which was invented by white people as part of a conspiracy to oppress the rest of humanity. The idea that all of Western civilization, including multicultural Canada, including the United States with its black president, all of Western civilization is a white supremacist society. All white people are racists, and only white people can be racist. I think by definition, hate speech is the incitement of hatred towards an identifiable group. And so these types of lessons and messages are inciting feelings of antagonism and animosity towards European peoples.
Can I just jump in for a split second? Because I hear and see some of the, this is Andrew over here. I have to ask you, can you identify specific places within actual text that Clayton is teaching where you could make a really fair, because to argue that someone is doing hate speech, so if we look at the Supreme Court decisions in the United States on hate speech, there's a lot of guide rails around what qualifies as hate. Okay? So for example, hate speech is speech that interrupts and oppresses someone else's rights to speak. And so it would be interesting to me to see fair evidence of any of this. I've looked at Clayton's materials, and I don't think that an objective third party would find this stuff to be hate speech.
Well, so in Canada, hate speech is defined as the incitement of hatred towards an identifiable group, or to any material that is intended or likely to circulate extreme feelings of opprobrium or enmity towards a racial or religious group. And so this is a theme, like in all of the texts, of this narrative of white people oppressing everyone else. And it's not really a study of race relations, it's a study of one perspective on race relations.
So the concept of race as a cultural construct is, you're arguing, hate speech?
No.
Okay, because you started here saying something that was, I think, quite present in the course. They are, in fact, looking at the concept. It's very common in academic discourse. I don't know whether you'd want to define that all as left-wing or right-wing. But the concept of race as a cultural construct is something that's been there now for several decades.
In sociology.
In sociology, and history, and cultural studies, and all sorts of different
But who cares what plumbers think about skin cancer? Race is a genetic question. And we should be studying, the works of geneticists.
If you look at what he's presenting, you don't see in the text. So I'd ask you to identify text and identify some language in that text that you feel would warrant the claim of it being hate speech. That's a very, very strong claim to have coming into a class we haven't even gotten halfway through. It strikes me, I think any reasonable person would think that you perhaps came into the class having this view.
I absolutely came into the class having this view.
Because you've said he's worked out to match your theory perfectly. And it's odd that you don't need the course to graduate whatsoever.
Well, it's because I'm fascinated by the topic.
One could worry that you're there to disrupt the class.
Well, disrupt the class. I mean, is there any evidence of that disrupting the class?
I'm pointing something out that I think an objective observer would kind of note at this point.
Well, I don't think an objective observer will be able to find objective evidence that I'm disrupting the class. Has Clayton accused me of disrupting the class?
I'm wondering whether coming into a class of this sort with a fully formed theory of what you're going to find, finding that theory, including claims to hate speech and other sorts of things, and not being able to cite it in any of the texts.
Well, you haven't given me an opportunity to cite it.
I asked twice, so I thought you'd probably have something in mind at this point.
Well, just this. So we watched the video of what's it called? Race: The Power of an Illusion, and just this narrative of how race was invented by white people. Race is a social construct invented by white people as part of a conspiracy to oppress other peoples. That message, telling it to both white people and non-white people, incites feelings of hostility towards Europeans. And so, if hate speech is messages which incite feelings of hatred, then that meets the definition. That's just one of many examples. As I read the texts, I highlight things as I go along and say, this stands out to me. This stands out to me. So if I could sit down and write out a whole argument, I could do that. I mean, I've got lots of evidence.
Interject, because in the meeting with Clayton, he he really feels, I guess, as the both of you are discussing, that you do have an agenda, and that he, on his side, has a syllabus that he's trying to follow to raise awareness around race relations in Canada specifically, and that the agendas are not aligned, and he is feeling quite upset about the disconnect in terms of the values, and he wants to follow the learning outcomes, and he wants to try to make sure that the class is a comfortable learning environment. And he has expressed, I guess, to Andrew and to myself that this is being compromised. And I have had a chance to look at the background material that he's prepared and provided everyone. He did share with me, I guess maybe one of your first papers where you were quite clear in terms of finding the course less than meeting what you had hoped in terms of discourse. But at the same time, he's pointed out, and as I have seen, that a lot of your references are not scholarly or academic.
Give me an example.
A couple of the bloggers that you've referenced.
Steve Saylor.
Steve Saylor,
yeah.
Who is not a scholar that would be on the same.
But I didn't reference him for anything academic. I just referenced his words, his definition of race.
That would be an academic.
Well, it's not something that requires research. It's just a way of phrasing something.
My point, though, is that what Clayton is attempting to do, both in the readings that he's providing and in the outcomes for the course, is really trying to cite, the scholarly references.
No way. You look at the readings of the course, and like all over the place, I'm highlighting things saying, "Where's the reference for this? Where's the reference for this?" Like I wonder. One of the questions I've been thinking about is: are we getting the unabridged versions of the texts? Because there's all these claims all over the place, where I'm thinking, man, the scholarly standards for this writing is just on the floor. Like I don't agree that Clayton is trying so hard to find texts that are scholarly written and there's a citation behind every claim. I think it's...
Okay, well then let's cut to the chase. My role here is to make sure that we've got a successful, productive, collegial learning environment that's going to benefit you, George, as well as the other students in the class, as well as Clayton.
Yeah.
And right now that's being compromised.
Well, no, but wait, is it though? Like, has he said? Am I raising my voice in class and interrupting him? Am I swearing?
Issues it's not.
Whoa, issues! What are you saying? Issues? I mean, we're talking about race relations in Canada. If I'm raising rightist perspectives, that's the role of the class. Are we studying race relations in Canada or not? If we're going to study something, we should be studying it from all perspectives, not just one side of the story.
Your opinion.
Oh no! Wait! Excuse me! Are you telling me it's my opinion that it's the responsibility of an educator to if we're going to study something, we're not going to indoctrinate ourselves in one side of the story. We're gonna study something from all angles. Why are you smiling? Isn't that absolutely true? I mean, what am I doing if I'm raising other perspectives than the ones that are presented in the text? How could that be considered disrupting the course? Isn't that the purpose of the course? Aren't we there to study these issues from multiple perspectives? Isn't that the responsibility of an educator? Aren't these good points? Like, tell me I'm crazy. Isn't this true?
You've come into the course with an agenda.
So is the teacher. So is the teacher.
Precisely, and he's the one running the course.
Yeah, and
his course outline is the one that we need to support. And I agree with you in terms of raising issues.
Yeah.
The way you are raising them and the citations you're making to date have caused Clayton concern that you have an agenda that you want to push and you're not open to collegial discourse around other opinions.
If I wasn't open to other perspectives, why would I be taking the course?
That's a good question.
I'm absolutely open to other perspectives. I'm fascinated by other perspectives. So you want to talk about who's not open to other perspectives? Look at what happens when someone raises anything other than a leftist perspective on these issues. I'm absolutely open to hearing what you guys have to say. The reason why I'm so I feel like there's a lot to be said on this stuff because I know a lot about it. I've spent, I have a degree from York University. I've spent 5 years writing essays from your guys' perspectives, regurgitating back to you what you want to hear about how we are an evil and especially immoral people, about how we should be ashamed and get down on our knees. I know your perspective better than you do. I know your perspective inside and out. I'm very familiar with your perspective. And the fact that I understand your perspective so well, is empowering to proponents of my perspective. And the fact that you are so bigoted, because what is bigotry? Bigotry is the quality of being intolerant of other people's perspectives. The fact that you are so intolerant of other people's perspectives and that you're unwilling to even consider if someone were to stand up and even voice another perspective in a polite and respectful way, I get pulled out of class and say, hey, what are you doing? Thinking the thoughts that you're not supposed to be thinking. You know, and because you're
Excuse me, nobody has said that to you ever.
Well,
I just want to be really clear, and please don't raise your voice, okay? We're trying to help make a collegial learning environment here.
Well, you know...
And you don't come across as someone, you interrupted me several times, you raised your voice. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I don't see this as a collegial discussion.
I'm sorry, I didn't perceive I was raising my voice.
You were.
And I'm sorry, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, didn't mean to interrupt you. But, you know, I think if the issue is that I'm disrupting the class, you know, has there been any evidence of that?
I'm not sure that disrupting the class is the issue. The issue is the uncomfortable position you're placing your instructor in terms of trying to deliver the content to the class.
So how am I making it uncomfortable? By voicing contrary perspectives?
You're
within
not.
the readings that I sent? Sorry, I interrupted you. Continue.
Well, we've looked at some of the work that I don't want to, but just take a little bit of focus. I've looked at your work.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't address the questions that the course is asking. So don't interrupt.
Oh, okay,
I'll
sure. Go ahead.
You seem like a reasonable fellow.
Mm-hmm, I am. Go ahead.
Your work isn't addressing the questions. Actually, as a writer, I can see that you've come to the question with a different question.
Mm-hmm.
And you're asking this different question.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to be very successful in the course because because you don't need the course. It's not about passing the course. What it's really about is disrupting the course by challenging the courses, not a position in the course, challenging the course.
Okay.
And I think that at the basis of this, if you were being fair, you would recognize that. Now, if you're interested in free perspective, so I'm going to suggest to you that the only reason you're really here is obviously that there's things happening in the class that are disrupting the ability of the teacher to teach the class. He's got my support, and so when you're here, it's because there's been I haven't been able to be in the classroom. I didn't want to disrupt what was going on. I thought probably best to come and talk to you directly, but it is disruptive.
What is specifically?
I can only say the things that you're doing in the class.
Well, that you can't. You're not making an argument then. You're saying
I'm presenting what I would normally do as the chair. The faculty come. They can speak to me about things that are happening in the class. I do take them very seriously, and so here you are. Your works to date in the class is on questions that aren't being asked in the class, which you may not like that. You'd like the questions to be different.
Well, I'll address that once
you're done speaking. The questions are different than the ones you're answering.
Yep.
So you're going off in a different direction. You're not successful in the course because you're not answering the questions, not because you're not answering the way we want you to, but you're not actually taking up a detailed look at the material. And the last piece is, I trust an experienced professor's report that this is disrupting the other students' abilities to focus and understand what is sometimes pretty complicated stuff. So I think we're not talking free speech, although you want to make this about free speech. I think we're talking about whether the classroom is the place for you to be making these arguments, or perhaps in places where you know that this class takes as a position, as a starting topic, the cultural construct of race, and you despise this idea, and you oppose it deeply. Okay. So you want to come in there, you can't start where everybody else is starting, because your feeling is racial-based, geneticist-based, definitions, and so you can't kind of participate in the class. You can't even answer the questions that are being asked because they're offensive to you. So I'd ask why you're there.
Okay, so at the beginning of the course, Clayton said that we could be flexible with how we answer those questions, because he said the reason for these readings, the reason for the journals, is for our own benefit, to explore the ideas that we want to explore. So that's, when I read a text, the way I've perceived it is that the questions are there to get you thinking, to write something down. Really, he said it seems like the purpose of the journals is to demonstrate that you've read the text, and so yeah, I read the text, and then I have some thoughts, and then I write down my passionate perspective is, the things that the thoughts that I'm having, and that's the way I've understood is the purpose of the exercise of those journals. And so yeah, so the bigger issue is this idea of what are you committed to saying I'm disrupting the course, or what is that?
We're talking to you today because we've had conversations with your professor.
Yeah.
And that the performance in the room has meant that you are affecting the learning of other students.
Affecting the learning of other students.
Yeah.
But don't say it so passionately, because you said you can't think of specific examples of how I'm affecting the learning. Like, I know that I'm presenting other perspectives, but can you think of what am I doing other than presenting other perspectives?
It strikes me that I think that we haven't gotten into that kind of level of detail.
Okay. So really, you don't really have an argument here. You can't think of specific examples.
That you are disrupting the class. I'm not saying I've seen
Okay,
you
well,
disrupt that
okay.
class.
So here's your homework. You got to find out specifically
Don't tell me what I need to do as a homework assignment.
Well,
I think what you perhaps need to do as a homework assignment is start answering some of the questions that are being asked in the class.
Well, if that's what's being asked of us, then I
And
can
not
totally
interrupt.
do that. You interrupted me.
Please, let's try to keep this at another level, which is what the whole issue is, I think.
Okay, so back to the issue. So I'm disrupting the class. We still, if we're going to change something, if it's a behavior on my part that we need to address, we need to find out what that behavior is. I mean, obviously, it's not a behavior. Well, it's not a behavior. So I'm presenting other perspectives, and that's a problem.
But the point is that the perspectives you're presenting are
Yeah.
not being backed up
Oh.
with the level of scholarly research that Clayton is trying to instill in the papers.
Those journals are meant to be journals. They're not meant to be research papers. I mean,
Just earlier, you accused me of being a Caucasian bigot. You know more about me
Caucasian
than
bigot.
I
I called you Caucasian? Bigotry.
do. You are making statements that are contentious.
Right. Well, the course is making contentious statements. The accusation that white people invented race as a part of a conspiracy to oppress everyone else is a very political statement. It's a political course, political topics. And, I'm presenting opposing perspectives. And that's totally legitimate. It's our responsibility as students to question our education.
I don't argue that at all. I agree with you. It's the sensitivity of the issues at stake here, and it's the importance of being able to back up your argument with substantive, scholarly, whether it's peer judged or whatever, opinions.
Well, I can totally do that, but the journals are meant to be quick little things you write down to demonstrate that you read the work. So that's not the place for, we're not expected to take the time to go and do all the research. I mean,
But you're making strong statements,
so is the course.
and that is the purpose of that course.
And okay, so then I'm fulfilling the purpose of the course if it's to make strong statements.
But you haven't been listening. You can make strong statements, as you have done to me, to Andrew, and in the course. But you've got to be coming from a place where it's grounded in a learning environment.
Yeah. Okay. So when he showed us that propaganda video of race and the power of an illusion, I all from memory, I pointed out, about how Stephen Jay Gould, in his book, which was published, Mismeasure of Man, in 1988, and how it was challenged 2 years later in '89 by John Michael of Macalester University, and it was challenged again in 2011 in a study done by by Stanford. Do you know Mismeasure of Man? And he measured the skulls of, I think Watson was the name of Watson or something like that was the name of the original skull sample which was studied. And it was, people full on accused Gould of fraud and faking his data. And, those are direct sources. John Michael of Macalester University and that other study that was done at Stanford. And, I can totally back up my ideas. Like But
your ideas, George, are a different agenda. The agenda of the course is about looking at the history of race relations in Canada and how that is affecting our multicultural society and our laws and so on.
Okay.
Your agenda is your agenda.
Well,
that is not the agenda of the course.
Well, if the agenda of the course is to look at race relations in Canada, I'm absolutely looking at race relations in Canada.
You're looking at race.
And so is the course. I mean, that's part of the discussion of race relations in Canada. I mean, that's there's not much of a argument there. I'm looking at race relations in Canada. Of course, I'm just looking at it from a rightist perspective. What do you think? There's a thought behind that face. No one makes that face without a thought.
George, I think lots of things, and I think you do too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So as I get to listen, because Michael can now listen while I talk to you, and so it's unfair to you. You're working hard.
I'm having fun. Go ahead.
And you're doing what you want to do. I know that. Okay. The mismeasure of man and its critics, right? I mean, you can no doubt find lots of stuff done by voices from perspectives that reconfirm a position that you hold, right? I've sat with students and tried to identify to them that a scientific thought is not one that looks for confirmation, but tries to find falsifications. It truly challenges itself. It tries to find ways in which it might err. Have you ever heard of that idea?
Yeah. Who was it? Was it
Popper.
Popper.
So I ask you, are you looking for opportunities to test your ideas? Or are you merely trying to beat up somebody else who didn't know that you were going to come at them fully formed with a complete set of opinions, fully ready to go? I think frankly, you kind of take a surprise attack, and then you kind of run, because ultimately.
Oh man, you're being kind of.
You asked for my thoughts. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And to be honest, you're still
responsible for your thoughts.
You've been citing a film you saw.
Yeah.
Right, and a figure in the film,
yeah.
And then you went online and looked at if anybody out there, had critiqued that idea.
Well, there's a whole book written about that.
But texts,
yeah,
is what we're talking about. Reading those texts carefully, and defending the position that this constitutes hate speech, is where we began this conversation. I interrupted you asking for evidence of these ideas, and I don't see them yet.
Well,
and you've said you can provide it, but it's not been.
Well,
I would think that having come into this course open to whatever perspectives would be presented, and then here you have something to read, and suddenly, shockingly, you find hate speech, but you can't cite anything particular.
No, come on, I cited it. Defending the idea that this is hate speech is an easy thing to do. If hate speech is the incitement of hatred towards an identifiable group, then these messages.
I think
these messages are.
I mean, right now there's a talk going on in the class. Right? We pulled you out, and I unhappily did so, because I think students need to be in their classes, and they're doing residential schools, right? The identification of a terrible history that occurs to a specific group doesn't impose some sort of hatred of another group. It merely identifies the history.
Well,
okay?
Come on, though. I mean,
so when you say identifying the fact of oppression in a society is not the same thing as condemning a group that isn't being oppressed in that society. You do have to ultimately do a careful job of finding the history, finding what happened, and reporting it. I mean, that's one thing, the history that's being accounted for in the class. Is it accurate? Is it up to academic standards? So that's one question. The other question is whether the starting point of the class is the cultural construct of race, and your position is that idea is deeply disturbing to you, and so that all the texts that work from that starting spot are going to be things you can't respond to because you're going to be unhappy with the starting position. And I think my job is to say that this can be very hard for students who don't have preconceived perspectives to get into a class and kind of engage in a real reading of the text when someone is already sitting behind them saying the entire starting position of this course is wrong. So you see how that could, at some level, say, well, wait a minute, before we can get to a position such as the one you're trying to hold, is it possible to just entertain some of this stuff and see where it goes? But it's hard when you're there to block every avenue of it.
So what you just said is...
So I mean, thank you for listening to me while I kind of presented that. I wonder why you persist in this. I really do. Like
what you just said is a very telling thing. The idea that we can't. Are we short on time or something? No.
I've got about 3 more minutes. I'm sorry. I've got to.
Okay. Okay. So then, if 3 more minutes, then to the big picture here. Am I disrupting the class? I mean, I'm presenting other perspectives.
Well, we wanted to meet today to talk to you. It seemed like it would be a good idea.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that you've come and talked to us.
Yeah.
I don't want to, but I think we'd probably want to talk a little bit at this point.
I'd like to get back to you. I'd like to debrief with Andrew.
Yeah.
My opportunity here was to hear your thoughts, George. From what I understand, just to sort of recapture, you don't need the course for credit. You don't necessarily have any misconceptions about what the course was designed to do and perhaps even how it's delivered in its content. You see this as an opportunity, though, to bring, if I can use these terms, a more appropriate discourse in terms of looking at alternative agendas around race within the course. I have to express again that your instructor has come forward to the chair and to the dean and expressed real concerns about the learning environment and his discomfort with some of the approaches that have been taken. So I'm taking this seriously. That's the reason I'm involved. We don't want to compromise your education. We don't want to compromise the education of the other students in the class, and we don't want to compromise the mental and physical health of the instructor. He's taught this before. This is, it's not something new to him. So I think that what I'd like to do is to maybe debrief with the chair, with Andrew, and get back to you very quickly.
Are you thinking about kicking me out of the course?
Not out of the course.
Out of the school?
Not out of the school.
Out of something? No, okay.
No, as I say again, we want to try to make sure that you are successful as a student. And right now, that success is being compromised because your instructor is really feeling discomfortable with not only perhaps the values, but the way that you're presenting them in some of the written material. So, one option could be that you continue, but perhaps we find a tutor, or there's a one-on-one, opportunity to make sure that you still could complete and get the credit, and still do the readings and meet the learning outcomes. But we just have to discuss, I think, internally what is best and then get back to you.
Okay. I didn't receive any negative feedback on the first journal that I submitted. That's the only one I've received feedback on yet.
Okay.
And so in terms of grades, like I didn't perceive that I was having any trouble with
Okay.
my grades in the course.
Okay.
And so yeah, I just want to make it clear that if the accusation is that I'm disrupting the class, then I think I think it's important if we're going to specify what am I doing? Am I raising my voice in class? Am I swearing? Am I doing anything other than presenting other perspectives?
And I want to be clear that isn't and it's not an accusation. We're not accusing you of anything, right?
Sure.
I'm following due process. I've met with Clayton, now I've met with you. Now I need to just debrief and reflect and get back to you quickly so that your learning isn't compromised and the instructor is comfortable and we can move forward.
Okay, cool.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Okay, thanks both.